first reader will be Kathy West. She'll be reading fiction. She's from Draper, Utah, is a second-year MFA student in creative writing. And notice that she's an MFA student. We couldn't have said that a year ago, now that we have an MFA program. So I think that's really exciting. She's won various awards, including BYU's David O. McKay Essay Contest and Inscape's recent fiction contest. She is allergic to every plant in Utah except for juniper trees and spends many hours sneezing during the month of March. Following her reading, Julia Moore will read. She'll be reading poetry. She was born and raised in a suburb of Memphis, Tennessee, on the border of Mississippi and Arkansas. She's a super senior, a term I've never heard of before, taking only 2 classes this semester and working as a technical writer and editor for a power generation company in Linden. She will graduate in April with a degree in English and plans to work as a teacher in an inner-city school for the organization Teach for America this coming fall. Julie has been published in the only publication to which she has submitted, BYU's Inscape. Those are pretty good numbers. This is her first contest submission. She moves along slowly due to her shy, wobbly nature. Shy? Creative nonfiction. Catherine Curtis will be reading to us. She grew up in Salt Lake City and is a first-year graduate student studying creative writing. She has previously won the Mayhew Essay Contest and has an essay forthcoming in Inscape. She is currently preoccupied with learning how to yodel. Okay, Kathy.
Thanks so much for coming. The detail about sneezing is less of an interesting detail and more of a warning. I took Sudafed this morning, but if I start sneezing uncontrollably, I apologize in advance. The story I'll read is titled Hysteralgia. If you gain some extra weight and already feel fat, people will ask you once a week if you are pregnant. If you ache for a child, people will ask you twice. Except that those people will not limit themselves to any demographic. Friends, neighbors, strangers in supermarkets, women at church you've only talked to twice, boys you haven't seen since high school who have gained more weight than you ever will. At first, your husband will not understand. For example, an old acquaintance might bump into the 2 of you at a used book sale. If that acquaintance winks and asks, "Is this your first?" your husband will ask, "First what?" Do not cry, not yet. Buy the books in your hand and hurry out into the cool March morning. When your husband sees the tears start in the parking lot, he will know. And then he will vow to punch anyone who asks if you're expecting in the face. Your friends will call up with their happy news. You will attend showers and wrap gifts in pretty paper, board books, or rubber duckies that measure bath temperatures. Be grateful if you are such good friends that they fail to send thank you notes, reminding how you generously bought rattles and teething rings for a baby who is not your own. You may see pregnant girls crossing the street, shopping for shoes, strolling the length of the mall. There's no way to staunch your surprise at how many of them are pigtailed and seem especially underdressed. Try not to stare at their bulging bellies that announce their unprepared maternity. Try not to overhear any of them say this pregnancy came at a really bad time. Perhaps you will see a 5-year-old girl at the supermarket begging her mother to buy her sugar cereal. She has the color of hair your daughters might turn out. Don't feel stupid or guilty for imagining that you would never buy your daughter sugar cereal, that you would get up in the morning and cook gourmet breakfast. Poached eggs seasoned with creamy cilantro onion sauce. Whole wheat pancakes made from scratch, topped with fresh strawberries. Your daughter would look at sugar cereal and scoff. Leave the grocery store. Eat something. Do not make poached eggs. If you crave a girl or a boy, or have already picked out names for both, know that once a month, nobody will blame you for crawling under your covers for an hour or so and crying. Brace yourself for large family gatherings, especially if you have many aunts or stupid cousins. You should only attend if you can exercise a few do-nots. Do not hold a grudge for more than a month. Your family, regardless of its size or type, is probably good at being nosy and offensive, and they probably don't throw parties often enough to make grudges worthwhile. You would just simmer for weeks until you arrived bitter and silent at the next get-together. If Aunt Lisa pats your tummy and winks, wear something even more slimming next time and get over it. Hating her forever would just turn to dislike for her shortbread and raspberry preserves. If your sister-in-law swears that she just knows you'll have a baby as soon as you learn what God is trying to teach you, breathe in and don't assume that she is emotionally flipping you off. She's too sincere. If your older cousin Carl brags it only took one shot to knock up a blonde from work, allow your eyes to look as aghast as you feel, but don't bother with reprimands. You will probably just make him laugh. Rise and walk into the other room, unless it is filled with relatives who have proven themselves the kind who will elbow you in the ribs and ask, "What's different about you?" Do not give anyone reason to pity you. You will know that the extended family wants to hear about possible pregnancies when they ask, "And what's next?" after every life event you report on at these gatherings. Your college graduation, your new job, your new house, your raise, your 2-week vacation to Italy, your promotion, your latest remodeling project, or even fulfillment of your life's calling. Just remember that the aunts want babies to play peekaboo with, that they are waiting to throw the next shower, that they just want to know how to connect. Answer, "And what's next?" with short answers about what they want to hear. When you talk about the size of family you want, tell the truth. Describe your life with words like hopeful, optimistic, soon. Sound happy and keep talking even if you're not, even if an ache has settled in your gut. If you don't, the aunts will eventually retreat to the kitchen together, where nobody will bother them for fear of dish duty. They will talk about how unfair it is, how you'd be a good mother, how maybe you don't really want a child. If this goes on too long, or during too many family parties, they will stop seeing a person in your face. The aunts will look at you as an absence, a barren blank. That is why you must enter the kitchen and offer to help with dinner cleanup. You can divert the conversation in so many ways. A question, a piece of family gossip, a joke, anything to make them laugh and love you again. Stay somewhere conspicuous and in the way. Wash every dish. Let your husband hold you whenever you return home from these sorts of family events, or from lunches with old high school friends, or neighborhood barbecues, or church. Every so often, you should even let him convince you to stay home. He will feel like he is helping. He probably will be. If the two of you stay home from your grandmother's birthday party, where she most certainly would sigh her wish that you give her a grandbaby before she goes, you may end up cuddled together on the couch. He won't care what you do as long as you're not at grandma's, so he will probably even let you pick the movie. And as you weep when Marilla tells Anne she does not want to adopt a girl at Green Gables, he will know that you are not really crying that Marilla does not want to adopt a girl, and he will hold you close and say, "Isn't it good?" He will not mean the movie. You might feel his shoulders sort of shake, and when he takes a breath in, and you will hear him whisper, "We get to be sad together." Select confidants with care. If your next-door neighbor asks if she can host a shower for you, do not assuage her embarrassment by telling her that you are trying. Do not say that you are trying a lot. A chagrined woman will submit you to advice, and she will say it doesn't matter how often you try, it only matters when. And then she will begin to ask questions. If you make this mistake, you will find no way out of her questions besides exposure or refusal. Refuse. She will then resort to personal anecdote about her own child. You could waste your time trying to figure the difference between her apparent age and her only daughter's surprising toddlerhood, but if you just ask, she can tell you it took 7 years and 4 months before the correct configuration of blue lines ever showed up on a home pregnancy test. If you confide anything in this particular neighbor, she will tell the neighborhood. Ignore your initial distress. People like a secret they can pity, a secret that relieves them when they think, thank heaven, they do not have to live your life. But the secret may make them think of your life merely as temperatures taken every morning and the words in vitro. They do not know what your life may actually contain, a fascination with Byzantine mosaics, a passion for rock climbing, or a list of countries still to visit, a goal to clean out the garage one of these summers, or membership at a kickboxing gym. If your husband punches anyone, it will probably be your cousin Carl, the one you would charge with statutory rape if he ever touched the daughter you don't have. If you do end up at Grandma's birthday party and you walk into Aunt Lisa's dining room to see Carl flat back on the ground and your husband rubbing his knuckles, do not overreact. Do not shout. Do not even ask what happened. Your husband is the kind of man who swings for good reasons. And Carl will never press charges, if only to avoid admitting someone beat him at anything. Carl quite possibly deserves the shiner that will develop underneath his left eye. You know Carl. He wants skinny girls in his own way. But more importantly, and what you do not know, he wants to feel important enough to be loved. Do not tell him you forgive him. He will only stagger to his feet with his hands over his face and tell you to go to hell. Tell him that you love him even if he's a jerk. He'll almost warm up to that, even if he won't look you in the eye. As you leave the room with your hand on your husband's shoulder, someone may say that Carl deserved it, that it took one punch, pow thud, and he was down. You might not know if you should be proud of your husband. Just give him space. He may tell you in his own time what prompted his fist. If Aunt Lisa leans in toward you later, after the punch has cleared most everybody out and Grandma has gone home, and whispers that Cousin Carl has actually impregnated another girl, this time the unfamiliar teenager at the party you haven't known how to approach, be grateful that the news doesn't hit you right away. You will have enough time to get another baggie full of ice for your husband's knuckles, say your final goodbyes, and drive home, where you will realize how quiet your house is. Then you can throw your coat on the floor and shout. You can even huff around the room and kick the furniture. But stop wondering why any teenager can pull her pants down once and find herself gravid. She just can. Maybe you could have back then too. Wondering does not make either of your situations easier. After you brush your teeth, you can ask your husband if Carl's new girlfriend is the reason for blackening Carl's eye. Your husband will easily call Carl a jerk, a loser. He will probably be free with his condemnation of Carl's politics, his job, his swaggering promiscuity. He may lament the adorable children that Carl has fathered and abandoned in his 3 decades on Earth, all of whom would be cherished in your home if they would only come. He might move to abstractions, the inequitable nature of life, the suffering of the fatherless, the irony of the universe, but he might not tell you what Carl said. You can press him for it if you want. You can be his confidant. Say, yes, the universe is unfair and Carl is a dirtbag, but nobody at a family party ever punched him over it before. If you say this, your husband will sit on the edge of the bed and have trouble speaking. He may want to relate Carl's words that preceded the punch in the face, but be unable to repeat them. He might say it was just something in the way Carl talked about women or babies or both. Say, so Carl's a jerk, so was his father. Your husband will grump about how that doesn't make it right, how he shouldn't be excused and protected by the whole family tree. Say every family has one like him. Your husband will stand and go to the closet. He will push the coat hangers back and forth on their rack, looking for nothing and not finding it. Say that you're glad he did something, that Carl deserved it. Listen to the scrape of the hanger hooks on metal. When you see your cousin Carl's girl again, perhaps at the family Christmas party, you might be surprised. You may wonder how such a lovely girl ever found her way to the guy you always saw as paunchy and thin-haired. Do not spend too much time marveling. She will probably interlock her fingers with his, lean her head against his shoulder, and love her man as much as you love yours. It does no good to wonder how this is. Whatever you know of Carl, she does not know. Or perhaps things are the other way around. If she whispers something in Carl's ear and then goes to the veggie platter, follow her. Learn her name. Ask where she found her adorable shoes. Tell her your favorite part about the holidays is the eggnog. She will probably not mention that she is pregnant. Do not ask her due date. Notice that when she talks about the future, her hands keep returning to touch her tummy that hasn't yet begun to swell. Be willing to feel alternately happy and sad for her. After all, you know that despite his promises and facade of affection, Carl will probably leave her. If he does, you can hold a grudge against him for even longer than a month. Try to forget what you heard from the aunts when you passed through the kitchen, that maybe she wants to keep the baby or maybe abort it, she can't decide. If you don't know what to say, pay attention to the reasons that she smiles. And most importantly, if their baby ever does manage to enter the dialogue, when she's due, how much she hopes that labor won't be painful, how she will name the child Sky, whether it's a girl or a boy, don't tell her that you want one. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Julia Moore, and I'm a super senior, which Lance is a senior in their 5th year of a 4-year degree. So, because I don't exactly have enough material for 12 minutes, I was going to start out with an encouraging and mildly humiliating story of how I first came into poetry. I was taking a class from Trent Hickman, and I was in a conference with him, and I mentioned that I kind of wanted to try writing poetry a little more hardcore than I was. I was just writing on the side. And he actually told me that he TA'd for a poetry class in graduate school, and he realized he could never be a graduate writing professor because he couldn't tell these kids their poems were bad. And he went on and said, you know, these kids came in and they thought poetry had to be this weird confessional, you know, crying stuff, and I just didn't have the heart to tell them that, you know, it wasn't very good. And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, weird confessional stuff, yeah, what do they know about weirdos? And then I went home and threw away all my stuff because it was totally weird and totally confessional, and I started all over again. So this first poem is an image-based poem I wrote for an assignment with Dr. Howe's class. And I was trying to think of a subject that is really image-based but still complex, and I thought of eating disorders. I feel like that's a very uniquely image-based mental disorder, and so I really wanted to try and get out the complexities in it, and it's called The Inspiration. Of all things in and on my body, I favor my bones. Unseen and far withdrawn, each one's goal to emerge like a slow wave. I rub my elbows, feel for delicate skin stretching over lengthened clavicle, lengthened rib. I wait for flexing tendons to rise. I wait to see the knobs roll like pop beads down my curved back in a body's worship of itself. Living bone moves, is slick. Its jut is much lovelier than the vulgar quiver of breast or thigh. My next poem is actually about a mission friend who's serving in Taiwan. And I'm really bad at keeping in touch. I haven't written her a single letter, but she still continually sends me letters and actually mocks me by sending Chinese thank you cards stating how happy she was to receive my latest letter. So it's called On Receiving Mail from Taiwan. This should be to Emily in Chinese probably. She who writes to me in felt tip notes on the weather, markets, a man who held her waist. That part's not true, she's missionary, but I just threw it in there. Signed in Mandarin, the letter feels long, and in thoughtless lonesome states that I am missed. Penmanship lovely, pale blue paper, both as constant as she, writing weekly to a friend who does not respond. To Emily I should write, having waited this long. This is my only attempt at a happy poem. I'm not very good at happy poems. And this is about my sister-in-law's mother, and it says, for Sarah's mother. Your energy is thick. It is reddish like the blood being wrung out of some heart. Perhaps that of a pastor's wife at her sister's funeral, the sibling she looked least like. Or the heart of a swinging bride on the dance floor of her first and only wedding. You buzz and hum while you read the news, and your smile produces a flash that strangers aren't used to. I'm not speaking about some cosmic energy, mystic and crystals and strange cards. I'm speaking of your fingernails' crescents, the crow's feet that splinter out from the sides of your eyes when you laugh your shouting laugh. I'm speaking of your scent, your lilt, and I crossed out the last line, and I wrote not good, rewrite before Friday's reading, and I didn't. So, the end of that poem. Okay. Okay, my next poem that has an ending is untitled. And this is one of those kind of poems where you kind of get it all out in one fell swoop and you think it's really awesome. And then you even wake up the next day, reread it, and still think it's pretty good. And then you take it to workshop and they tear it apart. And you realize that the poem was just not that into you or whatever. Okay. Tonight he breaks the kitchen window and gazes upon the red bloom that spreads across the knuckles of his right hand. His glasses slip to the end of his nose, which he ignores because he's alone, as he wraps an old clean rag around his fingers. The money didn't work, Dad, screamed once by his most defiant child, the one who usually seemed right somehow. The money didn't work. Neither did his fluttering wife with her illness, that left his bed full and sagging, the rest of the house quiet. His kids emptied out of Memphis, went to Alabama and Virginia. This did not make him happy either. And he feels more and more idle with each child's passing birthday. Yes, Dad, you are uncomfortable now, unsure like a teenager pulling on a tight shirt. You are caught in that moment that he inhales, chest expanded, shoulders twisting, yanks it down below his waist. He lets out his breath, and you are old. How much time do I have left? So long, do you know? 6 minutes. Okay, oh dear. Okay, this is a first draft that has not been ravaged in workshopping yet, which means this is probably the only time it's going to see the light of day. So, it's titled, Why It Took Me Half an Hour. Quite a while to notice the lecturer's left hand was missing, because I had a headache, because it was too warm, and because his bald head caught the compelling glare of the projector's light. He spoke of aging, which made me think of a blind woman's fingers fluttering across her child's face, which made me think of the baby my sister had by herself, which made me think of my lonely cousin's arm tattoo. Why did you put it there, a planet on your elbow, the cracked terrain of your arm? Did you not consider those lonely cosmic rings expanding and collapsing in the galaxy of your college skin as you waved goodbye to your mother 2 hours before her suicide? And why did it take your father half an hour to notice her bathtub was silent? I have a couple of working drafts I wanted to read to you guys. Another sad poem. Sorry, I'm a downer. They're just easier to write. Let's see. This one is about a friend of mine who lives in Mississippi, and it's called Divorced at 20. Some thought it audacious to feed the city fowl, but Liz had no reason not to. Her womb and home already empty. One had held a dying child, the other a wilted husband. And so she littered the stoop of her tired city house with bread, seeds, and overripe apple, and watched the birds descend. You are a gray scarf, she said, to a pigeon near her foot. Liz leaned back against the brick and spread her fingers wide. She sat there and lay and wondered if her youth was gone. Okay, and I have one final poem that is a working draft, and it is Ode to Previous Boyfriends. And most of this is not true, so don't worry, previous boyfriends out there. Ode to Previous Boyfriends. 1. I knew you'd be a bore, a beautiful, hard-laughing bore who stared at me unabashed, romantic, while I read a book or opened the mail. 2. Like a dozing dog watching its owner walk through a room, you lifted your head, then dropped it again. If you liked it, you should have shouted. Instead, you looked left, then right. You exhaled loudly. 3. You are small and I am small, mostly drunk while you are sober. The real attachment we have, besides our temper, is my sensitivity to hearing your mechanical heart valve click in loud rooms, even arenas. It ticks like a misplaced watch stitched beneath your scar from sternum to pelvis. That's the end. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Catherine Curtis. Kathy mentioned that telling you that she sneezes a lot was a warning, and I suppose telling you that I am obsessed with yodeling is also a warning, because you never know. If I'm nervous, I might just throw a little yodelay right in there, so don't be alarmed if that happens. My essay is titled Smells, and I want to begin by saying, as Michel de Montaigne said, to smell good is to stink. I can't remember if I put deodorant on this morning. This thought alone doesn't worry me because I don't think I smell unpleasant or sweat excessively, but I am teaching 20 college freshmen in 30 minutes who still make me very nervous. Now let me clarify here, I use the word deodorant to refer to antiperspirant deodorant, though some people like my brother David simply use deodorant. David believes in the body's need to sweat. He thinks sweating makes him healthier. He sees antiperspirant as an unnecessary plug for his pores, though he has no problem blocking his scent with Old Spice Pure Sport. Antiperspirant contains aluminum and is considered a drug for its body-altering ways, while deodorant contains ingredients that fight bacteria or simply smell better than your armpits do. That said, it's always possible that I didn't put deodorant on today, since putting deodorant on in the first place takes remembering, though I employ several strategies to ensure that it happens regularly. I'm not forgetful by nature. In fact, my memory is like an obsessive nag, renting space in the attic, pestering me about the dollar bill still in the back pocket of my pants, and reminding me, counting down the days till the strawberries in the back of the fridge expire. The nag just doesn't seem to care how I smell. Even though my deodorant pals around with my face lotion, centimeters away from where my fingers reach most every day, I sometimes still manage to forget to put it on. Sometimes I remember while I'm getting dressed, at which point I go back to the bathroom to correct my mistake. And sometimes I don't remember until I'm studying in the library like today, and I feel the sweatiness approach. Some people can feel in their bones when the rain is coming. I can tell long before it happens that I'm going to start sweating. It's a gift. I don't know quite how to describe the sensation. My body talks to me. Like I said, I don't think of myself as a smelly person, generally, excepting circumstances of intense physical exertion, but I could be biased or immune to my own smell without knowing. I think this immunity affects most people. We are incapable of objectively discerning our resting scent, how we smell when doing nothing, which may be a merciful glitch in human programming. When I was a kid, my family would pass the summer months between 2 mountain cabins and the southern Utah desert, and when I returned to my home for periodic layovers, I found the same comforting aroma each time I opened the back door. Sun-baked carpet, sleepy air, stagnant life. I patiently filled my lungs by nose, refusing the more efficient but scent-muted airway of my mouth, while I wandered through rooms to remind them of me and me of them. I didn't smell anything coming home every day from school or rushing in from play. Even weekend sleepovers were not enough to clear my nose to require reintroduction. If I could get a few weeks vacation from my body, I might return to a familiar and pleasant smell. However, I can never achieve enough distance to forget the scent of my skin so that I'm startled into remembering it. I sniff my forearms sometimes and smell nothing. I suggest that you try this. You can try it right now. I never smell anything. I like to smell other people's forearms, though, if they let me get close enough. Sometimes I try to be sneaky and catch a whiff on my way in or out of an embrace, and sometimes when I'm feeling confident, I just ask to put my nose near their skin. When I forget deodorant for a day, it's not so bad in terms of stink, but my armpits feel vulnerable. That is the sensation I couldn't place earlier, all defenses down, the tingling of exposure that feels like falling, or saying something you immediately want to take back. Without deodorant, I feel like an actor in that old Sure deodorant commercial, where the person not wearing Sure feels like a moron because she has huge wet marks under her armpits and spends the rest of the day making awkward, stiff-bodied, half-armed gestures. Because this commercial aired while I was mapping careful steps through puberty, certain scenes have stayed with me. Catching a football, sure, unsure. Motioning to the board during an important business presentation, sure, unsure. Holding a strap on a jostling bus, sure, unsure. Sitting in the library while no one's around with 20 freshmen staring at my mind's eye, sure, unsure. I look both ways before ducking my head under my raised arm for a clue. I still can't remember if I put deodorant on this morning, but I sense the sweat that is headed my way. There could be something to my inability to remember if you believe the camp that claims that antiperspirant deodorant causes Alzheimer's disease. The first news I heard of the deodorant Alzheimer debate came from my roommate, Katie, who exploded into our college dorm one day with a natural non-illuminant deodorant and an arsenal of information from her worried mother, Joni, who lost her father to his loss of memory. Though I know my ideas are far from scientific, it makes sense to me that memory holds our bodies and certainly our spirits together, that our lives literally depend on our ability to retain and reclaim our immediate and distant pasts. Once memory goes, it is only a matter of time until the rest of the body follows. The stakes of forgetting loom. We feel the cool of the shadow that we stand in. Despite persistent evidence that aluminum is not a likely cause of Alzheimer's disease, and despite the fact that we consume higher quantities of the metal through our mouths and not through our armpits, only absorbing roughly 1% of what we take in even still, people continue to weigh the costs of memory loss against sweating. Take Cynthia, for example, another freshman English teacher. At lunch during our work training, she told me how she assesses a day's potential sweatiness in the morning. And if it looks like a low sweat day because of nice weather, or low stress level, or whatever qualification she uses, she goes with natural deodorant. She knows it doesn't really work, and she doesn't think it smells very good, but she sacrifices for her mind. Some days she knows she can't afford to go natural, memory and all, and she splurges to coat her armpits with aluminum. What fascinates me is not that she believes she is losing snippets of her past with each underarm swipe, but that believing so, she still finds stopping her sweat worth it. It's not as though some people don't sweat, and others do. The average American sweats around 278 gallons each year, 3/4 of a gallon per day if sweating was uniform. A quantity large enough to leave room for less sweaty people to sweat half as much and still sweat plenty. When we see a man on TV, or worse, sitting next to us in church, whose shirt is newly two-toned from his own sweat, we are not confused by what we see, but we are embarrassed. The question we ask is not, couldn't he sweat a little less, but couldn't he hide it better? My brother David is right. After all, sweating is one way our bodies regulate their health. Sweat glands cover most of the human body. Some people have as many as 5 million such glands, with up to 340 per square centimeter of skin. And they release sweat according to rises in body temperature as a cooling agent. My odds of beating my glands do not look good, given the numbers and the fact that they work for me, so why insist on the battle? If visible sweating makes us awkward and uncomfortable, then potent body odor breaches the limits of our social graciousness. Both are natural phenomena, one leading to the other. Sweat is actually mostly odorless until it mixes with bacteria living on the surface of our skin, and yet we do all we can to mask them. Perfumes, deodorants, scented lotions, body washes, colognes, powders. The aisle of the supermarket that sells such products is a war zone of competing pastels and cheap flower imitations. That aisle could give a healthy person hay fever. Something should be said for the men's product section, which smells more like backwoods than mountain meadow, but which is small enough in comparison that it is barely a whisper thrown into a shouting match. Body odor is different in an exercising body and a resting body, as is our tolerance for each. 7th grade gym class, specifically the locker room, has forever linked for me the smell of natural BO with the feeling of awkwardness. Odors seem to rise from the white floor tiles like steam, to sigh out of the small red lockers. My locker partner, Rasha, a girl from Saudi Arabia with beautiful thick black hair who had recently arrived in the States, changed into her gym clothes unabashedly and without pause, while I stalled until the last moment possible, waiting for everyone to go to class. Once my tardies started adding up, and my merciless teacher became suspicious, I mastered a changing technique where I kept one shirt on while putting on another, which did not require me to show any skin but made me look very silly, like a chicken flapping her wings under saran wrap. I wasn't a prude so much as I was painfully self-aware. I noticed that some girls kept deodorant in their lockers to apply before and after gym, so I brought some too, even though I didn't really need it. Social puberty plagued me in junior high. Physical puberty didn't attack until high school, and being a late bloomer, I was anxious to show my awareness of the appropriate behavior. Rasha was not self-aware, nor did she keep deodorant in her locker, nor did she seem to keep deodorant at home. That was obvious once you came within arm's reach of her. For this reason, for her total disregard of what I perceived to be non-negotiable social law, she fascinated me. Actually, the way people smelled in general began to fascinate me, and I adopted a habit which I still continue. When people walk by me, and they have to be relatively close and in small numbers, I hold my breath until they pass. I wait for the rush of air disrupted by their body to intrude my space, and then I inhale. I smell the air they walked in. I smell them. It's a strangely intimate experience to have with people you don't know, especially since they don't know you're having it. The most disappointing discoveries for me are the tidal waves of cologne or perfume, heavy enough to disrupt my equilibrium, but generic and humanless. My nose looks to be intrigued, not drowned in this season's hottest scents. I'd like to be able to smell everyone without suspicion. I want familiarity and closeness to others of my species in the visceral way that clothes and products mask. I used to commute to and from school 40 minutes on bus plus 40 minutes on light rail, meeting my daily quota of humanity in both directions. One night on the Sandy to downtown line, I sat near the front of the train, next to a window, with my body smashed, closed, and contained in the corner, hugging my purse to my chest, communicating my separateness from those around me. This night, 2 boys stepped from the darkness onto the train midway through my ride and sat right across from me. Their pants sagged, their underwear showed, and they walked with jolting strides, accented by the lurches and skips of the train. The one with teeth crowding the front of his mouth in chaotic lines immediately began talking to me, opening with a pickup line that I've forgotten, which he must have found a strong start because he didn't let up until I got off the train 20 minutes later. Shortly after the pickup line, my fellow traveler gave me his fail-proof secret for determining how you feel about a potential romantic interest. Smell the top of his head. The top of the head, according to him, exudes a person's funk, his or her natural body odor. If you are attracted to a man's funk, chances are you will be compatible with him, physically at least. If his funk makes you want to vomit, you will know the relationship can't last. What my new friend called funk, scientists call pheromones, or chemicals expressed by one living thing to get a specific response from another of the same species. Pheromones explain the sexual and social behavior of many insects, though their presence and effect in humans are contested. We want them to be there, inside us. We want explanations enough that we are willing to peer past scant evidence to possibility. We want the animalness of the insects. The queen bee in a honeybee hive, for example, can release an odor that will stop all other female worker bees from developing ovaries, thus ensuring her dominance of the hive. I can imagine a few jealous women who wouldn't mind having such power or at least an edge in the mating frenzy. But I wonder how many would eagerly step up to the counter for their portion of pheromones if it smelled like BO. People actually search for aphrodisiacs, but given the natural smells of humans, they probably wouldn't smell like roses, and manipulating the scent would likely destroy their effectiveness. In terms of aphrodisiacs, again, insects have humans beat. The male monarch butterfly has an elaborate pre-mating routine that involves collecting an alkaloid from certain plants, which causes a chemical change that releases a pheromone, the odor of which convinces female butterflies to mate. There is no trial period. Can he dance? Is he kind to his mother? Will he be a good provider? Courtship is momentary. Smell makes the difference between parenthood and the single life. I knew a boy who liked my funk. There may have been others, but Jeff, the dreadlock-wearing, thrill-seeking, nature-loving bike mechanic, is the only one who has let me know. He worked with me one summer at the Boy Scout camp, and it was during my week-long shower hiatus that he informed me, in the same way he might tell me I was intelligent or beautiful, that he did not mind my smell. I guess I liked his funk too. Once when I asked for the name of his cologne, his amused and immediate laugh startled me. "Kitty, you're smelling BO." No, BO does not smell like cologne. I'm definitely not wearing cologne. I'm not even wearing deodorant. When I smell like this around my mom, she tells me to go take a shower. Maybe the uncontrollable and passionate potential of pheromones frightens us to the deodorant aisle. Let us use our brains instead. Let us be rational and practical and clean humans, not stinky reactionary animals, we plead, as we pile products into our carts. Maybe forgetting my deodorant is actually remembering. Thank you. Your lady, oh, lo, 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 your lady, oh, lo, yo, your lady, oh, lo, lo, your lady, oh, lo, That's all.
Yeah, I can't do that on command.
Where do you guys find that you come up, like, where do you guys think the best sources for inspiration for all your work is? Like where do you get the most ideas?
I'll start. Straight up reading other people's poetry. So I can't do it any other way. I've tried. So I tried to reach inside myself, and I don't really find that much cool stuff. So I just read as much as I can.
I would say definitely in just the most mundane and boring. I think the challenge of nonfiction, or what I love about it, is trying to make just the very everyday interesting. The first line, all I thought of when I started my essay was the first line, which is, I can't remember if I put on deodorant today, which is what I thought, and then just started from there. So even the smallest everyday things I think are worth writing about.
I just keep a notebook like just things that I observe, and then I make stuff up about them. Like, to my knowledge, my husband has never punched anyone in my family in the face. But I have a lot of friends who are having babies and friends who aren't having babies and want to, and so my story grew out of that, just from kind of the notes I took about seeing that experience go on.
You're all very gifted.
Thanks.
Are we good? No, we're not off the hook yet.
Tell us about your revision process and how you approach it and what strategies you find are the best and what works for you and what doesn't.
I'll start
Okay.
again.
Thank you.
Well, I usually think my stuff's really good, and then I have to take it to other people, and they tell me it's not good, and then I start to realize it's not good, and then I revise. So workshopping is essential for me, or at least putting it away for a day makes sleeping on it makes all the difference. I'm sure you know that, Cassie. Just waking up and rereading something, you're like, oh yeah.
Amen. Really, time is the biggest thing. Like, maybe it's just a thing about writers. Like, we write something down, we're like, oh, that's so cool. But just having time to let it sit and then come back to it is the biggest thing for me. And then I just start crossing things out and moving stuff around and getting rid of a lot.
One thing that I hope that I do more that I'm starting to find helpful is to view revisions as maybe like simultaneous existences of what I've written instead of replacing it, so that there's not as much pressure, you know. Like, I can write something different and still have what was before and compare and play around a lot more and not feel like if I erase a line that it's gone forever, but just maintaining a lot of different drafts simultaneously to see what works and what doesn't and play around in that way.